Hi, everybody. This is PJ with a quick PSA for the episode. I will not be present during this episode, but I thought it'd be fun to do the intro and outro, so you'll get me there. This episode contains a lot, and it's certainly suited for mature audiences. So if you are not a mature audience member, now's your chance to get out. All right. Are you gone? Okay. There is an absolute metric fuck ton of not safe for work language on this show, including discussions about young adult fantasy, fairy sex, plenty of Draco Malfoy, certainly some discussions of oral sex, incredible Scottish accents, and some humongous monster cock. The only spoilers to be concerned with are that of the ACOTAR series through A Court of Silver Flames, but even then it's mostly minor. Enjoy!
Welcome to Words and Whiskey Short Pours, a monthly podcast where we have a fun time discussing fictional worlds and the people that create them, all while boozing just a little bit. My name is Kross.
And I'm Lindsay. Kross, you said just a little bit. That's not what I was told coming on this podcast.
We're probably going to be drinking more than just a little bit. You're right. That's a good call.
Well, thank God for that. Today's episode is a special one where we have a small and lovely harem of guests here to discuss all things spicy, smutty, fantastical, and steamy. That's right. This Valentine's Day, we're discussing romance novels. Say hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Yes. Awesome. Just so that we can get introduced to everyone, we're going to move into the usual kind of drink segment here.
Crossland, what are you drinking just a little bit of tonight?
Just a little bit. So I am having, what did we settle on this? Not Hoth, Spur of the...
Spur?
What are we calling this?
Oh, it was like...
Spur of the Moment cocktail.
Spur of the Moment cocktail, named after the wonderful novel Ice Planet Barbarians series, Ice Planet Barbarians. And what it is it's 2 ounces of gin, 1 ounce vodka, half an ounce of lemon juice, 6 blueberries, an absinthe rinse in the glass, meaning you just swirl around a little bit of absinthe and throw it away, and then kind of shaken all together, poured into a martini glass. I, of course, reformatted it into a very nice 16-ounce glass because I wanted to enjoy it. And topped with Jones soda, of which is blueberry lemonade Jones soda, which gives it that color throughout, or the bright blue color throughout. So, deep blue color. My vocabulary is very specific, and I'm so excited to be torn apart for it.
Torn apart.
No, Kross, the spur is part of his penis, so calling it deep is the right thing.
Fuck. I just like have blacked out that novel from my brain at this point. I read it like when we thought of this idea a couple of months ago, when Lindsay pitched the idea, I was like, okay, so I'm going to gather some of the things that I've heard of, and like Ice Planet Barbarians was one, and man, it's just gone. It's like disappeared into the void.
So you're basically drinking Dick of the Moment cocktail.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
I told my friend at law school that this was happening, and she said, "Oh, have you ever heard of Ice Planet Barbarians?" And I was absolutely floored.
I had to tell my friends in a bookstore that it's a monster fucking book. They were like, "What's this? Is it good?" And I was like, are there children around? Like, do you want to know what this is about?
Is it good? I mean, it's highly specific.
It's a certain kind of kink.
We'll definitely tackle. Yeah, it is a certain kind of kick. We'll definitely tackle that. Following that up, we're asking a little bit of a different set of questions than we would normally kind of talk about right off the bat. To start it off, what do you need to read? So in this case, what I need to read is absolutely no alcohol. Actually, I cannot drink and read unless I'm listening, in which case I can do whatever the fuck I want. I will like run and listen. I will walk and listen. I will play video games and listen to books. No problem. So, but if I'm curling up with a book, I cannot be drinking whatsoever. My book recommendation is one of 2 for folks. I've recommended in our regular show, The Greenbone Saga, to just about everyone I possibly can. So I felt like I had to come prepared with a second one, but I'm going to recommend it to you guys here. It is a little bit more of a fantasy story. Not fantasy. It's like Godfather meets fantasy, if that makes sense.
Cool.
But the sexuality is so well portrayed throughout the story, and there are multiple relationships going on, that it does everything justice, and it's all like the romance is very central to a couple of the characters' lives, and it's just so well done. Greenbone Saga by Fond du Lis. Otherwise, best served cold. by Joe Abercrombie. It's the fourth book in the first Law series, but ends up being a very, very different novel than the rest of them. A badass mercenary, woman mercenary, kind of gets this crew together to kill her brother's killer and to hunt down, so revenge dish best served cold. And the sort of sexual encounters that happen through that book are so well done and well, like, interestingly executed with a character that you wouldn't expect. And it's fun. It's a will they, won't they in that case, but it's leave me alone. We haven't even gotten to the drinking rules yet. I knew that this was going to happen before we got there.
Everyone to know that during that whole thing, we were just roasting Crossland in the chat.
I don't know, it's roasting. It's pretty flattering. We're referring to him as Daddy. That's Daddy.
We're telling Daddy Crossland to take that spur deep. Take her.
Yes.
Throw it back.
With that, I'm going to kick it to Kelsey to start off by introducing yourself.
Hi, my name is Kelsey McKinney. I am a writer/book nerd. I run a women's feminist publication called Catcall Magazine, where we write about really neat intersectional stories that are about women, the LGBTQ plus community, and allies. And then in that vein, I get to sometimes write about books, and I often write about smut books. So I am really fucking excited to talk about all the dirty shit that I like to read. And tonight I am drinking the Sweet as Honeydew cocktail. For anyone who's read From Blood and Ash, this is a direct reference to the main character's, shall we say, taste of her pussy.
Her sexual awakening.
Literally, I'm like, we love pussy in this household. So my drink is a honeydew Bellini, basically. So I had to make the honeydew portion first, which was 2 cups of honeydew puree, a 4th cup of sugar, because this is a sweet as honeydew drink, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and then once you toss a little bit in the glass, you top it all off with Prosecco. And it is like, I think I finally understand, because as someone who loves pussy, I was like, I'm sorry, honeydew what? But like, now I get it.
Nice.
And then in that same vein, what I need to read is a fully charged Kindle, a pair of really comfy pants, and sometimes my cat likes sleeping on my lap. But if I'm reading books that I really like to read, if I'm, as I say, reading left-handed, I also really need a charged vibrator. So that is my setup for book reading. And my recommendation still, in all of the same, I know, I'm just laying it on here. I don't know, Kross, why you immediately kicked to me. You might want to save me for the end of this lineup. But my book recommendation is From Blood and Ash, which I keep talking about. I promise it's not just cunnilingus. There is a lot of it, but it is basically a vampire book that's not a vampire book. It's enemies to lovers, spicy romance, lots of stabbing. It's a favorite of mine. If you've ever loved Twilight, this is like the adult Twilight. It's addictive. So cheers.
Excellent. Love that. That's such a good set there. I can't believe, what the fuck am I saying? All right. Anyway, I'm setting myself up in a terrible way for the rest of this. It's going to be so good. So easy to poke fun of me. Okay. With that, we're going to go to Addie next.
Cool. I hope you all know that I was giggling like a fool the entire time that Kelsey was going.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm Addie Whelan. I am a social media manager by day and a Hermione slut by night. I ship Draco and Hermione more than any other characters in the entire world. So I can be found reading fan fiction on TikTok, reading fan fiction, comma, or on TikTok talking about fan fiction, comma, or on Discord with a bunch of my friends talking about the fan fiction that we read or saw on TikTok. I'm a freaking massive music nerd, so my big thing is that I like to build playlists off of every single book that I read. I have like 500 plus playlists on Spotify, which for every single book that I read, I make a playlist for. So tonight I am drinking basically like a mezcal paloma. I'm calling it a quart of smoke and sweet. It's mezcal, fever tree grapefruit, and a little bit of lime juice. For me to read, I like my yellow IKEA chair. I go on YouTube and I find these 8-hour loops of ambiance music. Usually they have rain sounds, and then sometimes they have like piano or classical music over the top because I like a little bit of noise, but not enough to distract me. Kim Crawford Sauv Blanc, always in my engraved W wine glasses, and a stuffed animal that fits perfectly behind the small of my back because I like just to be perfectly comfortable. On the flip side, if I'm listening to an audiobook or an audio fic, there's nothing that makes me feel more powerful than when I am grabbing a tomato or any other produce at the grocery store and I'm listening to someone absolutely get railed. Like, listening to smut at the grocery store is possibly the most empowering thing that I learned to do during COVID. That's like, incredible. You'll be like grabbing a cucumber and they'll be talking about like just absolutely getting sucked off. And you just like feel like, yeah, all of you guys are listening to Taylor Swift. Y'all are listening to like whatever you're listening to. And I'm just listening to someone get absolutely boned. So that's me. The book I want to recommend, if we're talking about fan fiction, I strongly recommend Bring Him to His Knees. It's by Music. You can find it on like AO3, which is Archive of Her Own, or honestly, probably fanfiction.net. It's a Draco and Hermione from Harry Potter fake relationship trope. They are solving a murder mystery and they have to go to a kink club. It is emotionally damaged Draco, which could make a girl fall out of her chair because I love him. And Hermione is witty and clever and the banter is exceptional. And if we're talking about a real book, I want to talk about The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. Fun fact, she was a Hermione author first. She wrote a ton of fan fiction. She self-published, and then she actually got picked up by a publishing house, and her book is coming out now in March. It's dark academia. It is excellently written. It is possibly the best piece of literature I read in 2021.
One of the friends of the show, Pierre Ford, absolutely loves that book, and we're actually coming back to talk about it in April, I think. So, yeah. Wow.
It's a gorgeous cover.
I need to add that, like, I am nowhere, like, near deep in fan fiction as Addie is, but this woman has never led me astray. She has incredible fan fiction recommendations, and they always kick ass. So listen to her and try it. All of you listening, try it.
And I have playlists with like 200 plus followers on them, like my Dark Draco Malfoy one, or like I have one I just created the other day, and there's a book called Wait and Hope, and in Wait and Hope there's a character named Theo, and Theo is what Harry Potter fanfiction universe has replaced Crabbe and Goyle with, is Blaise and Theo. And Theo in Wait and Hope is extremely very gay and very closeted, except for when he wants to be. And so I made a Wait and Hope Theo Not playlist, and it's just a bunch of absolutely fantastic gay anthems. And it is like, I just love it. I can talk about it forever.
Addie is out here doing the work that we need. And thank you.
Please keep in mind, I work all week in social media, so I know how to use the tools. So I've used the tools for my own brand.
That's a mystery tool you later.
And now I've built my own TikTok empire.
Your TikTok empire. We love it.
My TikTok empire. I am Daydreaming Draco. Come follow me. Come hang out. I just love to daydream. My favorite Radiohead song is Daydreaming. That's where it came up from.
Thank you so much. I think that brings us to Mary next.
Hi, I'm Mary. I am a teacher, but I don't usually claim that when I talk about smut on the internet with people. So I'm just going to go with also I like to sew and I like to dance and I have a dog and that's pretty much it. I'm drinking a drink I called Chapter 54 with caffeine-free sweet and spicy herbal tea because the chapter from Court, Mist and Fury is known for being kind of sweet and spicy, just like the tea. Jameson Irish whiskey, lemon, honey, and then like a fuck ton of cinnamon because you get a little extra kick in there. And I'm drinking it in like really a glass goblet to feel like a bad boy bitch.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I thought you drank half of that earlier, by the way, and now it's full again. So I'm concerned. Did you just re-up your... All right.
A little bit.
To hold her to it, Mary is an incredible seamstress, like just an artist. And she has multiple times said that she wants to create the 3 sister dresses from ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses. And so I'm putting this on the internet. So now she has to do it. Everyone bully Mary on the internet until she makes these dresses.
You better, Mary. You better do it.
You little bitch.
Mary, I'm begging you.
Not my daughter, you bitch.
What do you need to read, Mary?
I need like a warm cup of tea, glass of wine. Sometimes my fiance will draw me a bubble bath with like a ton of candles. And like the other day, he brought in like a plate of nachos, which not at all is an appropriate bath time snack, but it really like worked for me. Did I drop a little bit of shredded cheese in the tub with me? Who's to say? But none of your business.
It's just Mary in a bag of shredded cheese.
And I just
Mary over here living the dream.
American
living the dream.
And then I just need a way to rest the book so I don't have to use arm muscles while I read because I don't want to do that. But yeah.
Reading is not a sport. We are not sports kids. We are book kids. We are inside kids.
But yeah, just most of the books I read, none of them are literary masterpieces by any means. But I'm always looking for a book to pull me out of a book hangover or a slump. And those books are usually just a nice romance with a little bit of trouble that's predictable, and they follow a very similar pattern each time. So I'm going to recommend, if you're really depressed and you just finished the ACOTAR series, just dive into the selection. You can finish all 3 books in 48 hours, and you can just feel a little heartwarmed. And you're in middle school again in your Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen, dystopia moment. So it's like The Bachelor, but royalty core is how I would describe it. So,
hell yeah. Book hangovers are the absolute worst. Tiff, you're next.
Hi. I'm Tiff, and I am a nonprofit worker and also a grad student. I'm currently in school to do teaching eventually, so that's cool. I am a big Star Wars fan, and I'll talk to anybody about Star Wars for a long, long time. And I'm also a big Twilight fan, which is something that's coming back into style, which is kind of fun. Because it was not at the time. It was not at the time. And I'm newer to reading romance novels proper, because it's just not something that really tickled my fancy at the time, or previously. And I got into it more recently. Actually, Lindsay was the one who was you should read ACOTAR, and then we can talk about it. And now we've slowly made our entire mutual friend group read ACOTAR, which is so funny. But yeah, that's kind of me. Right now I'm drinking what I'm referring to as the Why Am I Covered in Feathers? It's vodka, cranberry juice, white rum, lime juice, sparkling sugar on the rim. Because it's a cheaper, and what I had around, Sex on the Beach, which is essentially what that is from in Breaking Dawn. When I am reading, I like to have 3 drinks. I am a 3-drink lady. 1 for hydration, 1 for caffeine, and 1 for fun.
Yes.
Listen. I need you to understand that I got my ADHD diagnosis during COVID. So that's just kind of explained a lot of things. And then I also listen to music. I don't super care if there's words or not, but if it has words, it needs to be something that I know. Tend to prefer headphones, but speakers are fine too. The book that I want to recommend is kind of a total left turn from what everybody else has talked about, but I want to talk about Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. It's a Star Wars novel, but it's not super Star Wars-y. It won't make you hate yourself like reading other Star Wars novels sometimes does. It's light enough on lore that I've seen non-fans really enjoy it, because it's also a tragic romance. It's kind of a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but in the Star Wars universe, and it does a really good job of, even though it's not super lore heavy, it still has that big bad doom feeling that the Empire gives in Star Wars world. It's delightful. There is a little bit of steam, but it's technically a YA, so it's not super descriptive, but it's very romantic and lots of longing and tension and that kind of stuff. So I would recommend Lost Stars. Even if you don't like Star Wars, I would still recommend Lost Stars.
That's awesome. I want to.
I love that recommendation. I've read just about every legacy book. I've talked about this so much on the show, but I've read almost every book. I haven't read Lost Stars, so there we are. Now I've got something to go home and read.
And Lost Stars is canon, so you can start reading canon stuff too.
Fuck. Losing all of that canon, I don't need to go into it. Anyway, it's hurtful, but it's okay. It's pain. That brings us round to Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Lundeen. I am a soon-to-be Juris Doctor, avid reader, hiker, poetry writer, road tripper, and certified hot girl.
And don't forget, she's spicy.
And don't forget, she's spicy. Tonight I am drinking the Rita's Special, which is a little ACOTAR reference for those of you in that vein. And the Rita's Special is a tantalizing, wonderful drink that includes whatever I had left over in my cupboard. So I don't actually have a lot of alcohol at my house right now because I'm in law school and I don't have time to drink. So this drink is made out of I'm drinking two separate drinks. One is a pre-made drink from a distillery near me called BB Bent Brew Stillery, and it's called Spicy Dog. I bought this drink when I was at the distillery, brew distillery, whatever, with some friends, and put it in my trunk and forgot about it until earlier today when I was looking for something to drink. The other drink, the Rita Special that I'm drinking, includes some actually really lovely gin that I got as a gift from a distillery in Alaska, and then the last can of LaCroix in my fridge, and some blueberries. So if you want to make
TLDR,
that one.
Lindsay, what do you need to read?
To read, I am a little like pillow princess when I'm reading, and
she
maybe in
is.
real life too, but I need all of my snacks and a warm drink next to me with a blanket, comfy clothes on my couch under like 18 blankets because I am not moving for 2 hours. Like there have been times where my roommate is up and walking around and I'm like, buried under these blankets with a book. And I'm like, Leondine, will you go fill up my water bottle? And like, I'm objectively closer to the kitchen, to the water, but I'm under these blankets and I'm reading and I'm so sorry, but that means I'm not moving. So that's what I need to read. And then the book I'm going to recommend to everyone is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Morgenstern is best known for The Night Circus. Controversial opinion on my part. I actually liked The Starless Sea better. Both are awesome. Both are really, really good. But The Starless Sea is a queer romance that's very whimsical and quirky and well written. It has some kind of like loose Neil Gaiman / like series of unfortunate events kind of vibes. It's really, really lovely. The romance doesn't show up till later in the book, but it is well worth the entire trip. So that's what I recommend to everybody.
Awesome. We got through intros. That's fantastic. I'm so excited that we get to get into the meat of the episode. It's always a curious thing to go through. The meat of the episode. I knew exactly what I was saying. Excuse me. So with that, we've got a different spin on this episode. We're going to be running through. I am going to mostly be playing Arbiter to make sure that we move from topic to topic. That said, we're going to do this a little bit differently as well. We actually have a drinking game tied in for those of us who are doing this right now, and you can play at home too. So we've got, really the game is just a couple of rules. It's pretty simple. It's anytime we bring up a trope outside of the current section, meaning that if we're talking about we keep the tropes in whatever we're talking about, and if we bring in something else to talk about how it relates, we take a drink. Everyone drinks. In that case, in those individual cases. And then we've got, so that includes things like Hades, Persephone retellings, Enemies to Lovers, Dystopia, Broody Boys. What's another good one?
If you add emotionally damaged to this, I'm
emotionally
screwed.
Damaged. Yeah, I mean it's the list, right? So if it's a trope, we'll all call you out. Like that'll be the trick.
One bed.
I would
Yeah.
really like a
Proximity.
clean
Sleeping bag.
take of Crossland saying Birdie or Batty Boys for like a ringtone for him.
Broody Boys, yeah.
Ooh.
Spicy.
Broody Boys every time. That could just be on repeat. It'll be fine. That'll be my new ringtone. Beyond that, we've got individual rules because you guys know each other best, and I think that this is kind of a fun way to do it. So for me, it's anytime I get shut down or say something dumb, which is going to be whenever I open my fucking mouth. Never, not even one time. Anytime Lindsay giggles uncomfortably at something that someone says. Addie mentions Harry Potter.
Bestie.
Anytime Kelsey recommends a buck wild plot. Anytime Tiff brings up Twilight, and anytime Mary, Jesus, I read two words at once. Wow, that's dyslexia. Yeah, clearly. I'm going, fuck, damn it. Mary brings up Sarah J.
Carson, I thought
Maas.
you were colorblind, not dyslexic.
It's the same thing. What is dyslexia if not colorblind, but for letters?
That's a bonus roll. That's a perfect bonus roll. I love that. So these individual rules, though, only apply to that person. So anytime I get shut down, I take a drink. If Lindsay giggles, Lindsay takes the drink, etc. So those are individual for us.
Fuck.
The other ones apply to
You're gonna be on
everyone.
the ground.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so
angry, but it
much
makes
fun.
sense.
Thanks, Daddy Kross.
Yes.
Praise
Yes,
being
Daddy
activated.
You're being so good to us.
My God. All right.
Being naughty.
So with that, now that we have the drinking rules established for the episode, I'm taking a drink. Fuck.
This is the most
All right.
action he's gotten in years, you guys.
All right. So with that, we are going to move into the, I don't want to say meat of the episode, but it feels like we're going to move into the meat of the
It's
episode.
the meat of the
The
episode.
shaft.
We're
of
gonna
the
we're gonna start at the
episode.
tip. We're gonna work our way down. It's fine. So this is
Sword.
We use it as you go down and pull it to go up.
Sorry.
all right.
I read it. Hold on. I screenshotted it for this exactly reason. I
Just the
screenshotted
tip.
something that I thought was very relevant that my friend wrote. And it was from this Serious Ginny thing.
I'm super ready.
And it was about squeezing when you go down.
Can you go
and
back to
By the
her,
way-
just,
you go
like
back
giving
down,
a rim
squeezes
job
before pulling
to her
back up.
cocktail.
Addie, you actually did talk about Harry Potter outside of the realm, so it's important that you take a drink.
Damn it.
I will have to.
Oh, that's
I'm
so
talking about my
fast.
friend teaching me how to give a hand job.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love it.
With that,
Keep
we
in
are going
mind,
to.
you guys, that I'm like still sleep with a teddy bear and I'm 28. Like I'm like a baby.
We love that for you, though.
We do.
With that, we're going to kick to Kelsey to talk about why we're here to talk about this specifically and kind of the importance.
Yeah. So why should we care about romance books? I kind of want to start off with the fact that if you're not a romance fan already, like romance books kind of get a bad rap when it comes to being something that's cheesy, like long-haired Fabio on the cover, like those paperbacks your creepy old aunt with a bunch of cats reads, like, you know, because classic misogyny, basically. So,
Amen.
right? Like there's a very common thing in our world where things that women enjoy are written off as stupid, which is frankly bullshit. And especially in this case, romance books are often written by women and for women. That doesn't mean that that's their limited audience, but because that are, oh my God. Okay. Sorry. I'll get back into my groove. But basically,
You're killing
especially, thank you, especially in this case where romance books are often written by women for women. Now that's not the only audience that can enjoy romance books, but they've gotten a bad rap and they don't deserve it because there's actually so much more to them than what, you know, your aunt with a bunch of cats, who honestly, your aunt's probably like really fucking cool. Like, let's be real. She's probably great. But some of the benefits of romance books is that love and relationships is actually a really entertaining aspect of literature. Like it is exciting and thrilling and it's no less than action or fantasy or mystery. Like those things can be woven together. There's something really great about romance in that we can learn a lot about relationships with ourselves, with each other, with other people that we care and love about. I mean, it's like a glimpse into kind of our desires in terms of the connections we want. And then when romance books get spicy, it's this really awesome safe space for us. It's this really awesome safe space for us to explore sexuality and things that we're sexually interested in a way that's really consensual. No one gets harmed. It's not real bodies doing things. It's a way for you to kind of explore your kinks and spicy things and stuff that maybe you're attracted to in a really consensual and safe way. And often, like with romance books, it's not just porn, but sometimes it is, and that's totally great too. But we're going to kind of go through the gamut of all of these different aspects of love and romance and sex and desire. And I think you're going to be really excited because I'm really excited.
And here's the
so
thing too, like it literally. Okay, like if you were one of the people that read these in high school or you read them in college or like you read fan fiction in high school or fan fiction in college or like you read after as it was being released, people were like, oh, you read fan fiction? Like there was this whole mentality about like people who read these kind of books and exactly what you said. Like if you went to Barnes & Noble and like the romance section with the paperbacks of like Fabio with the long hair on them. And it was like, it was very shameful to go over there. And then suddenly it's like, but like when you actually read these books, it is like empowering. It is empowering to see a woman or a man or any kind of couple of any mix or different genders or whoever believes in what. And everybody is so damn happy. And everybody is so just living their best life. And I feel like personally, that's half of like what TikTok did. Like TikTok literally changed it from, hey, you go to Barnes & Noble, you don't want to go to this section, to suddenly everybody is like seeking out Kindle Unlimited, like spicy romance books, and there's a no in between.
Yeah. Addie, you touched on like the empowerment of reading romance, and also I think like the opposite side of that, like the shame that comes from wanting to explore your sexuality. And as someone with a very religious background, and I don't think I'm the only one in this whole podcast who has very similar experiences.
All right, let's go. Ex-Catholic.
Right? Like, there's a lot of religious trauma that comes with shame and embracing your sexuality, and romance books and smutty, dirty books give you the chance to come like face to face with your sexual desires in a way where you can figure it out internally, which is what I have loved about being able to read dirty books.
And
so
honestly, too, I will say I am more confident in who I am, what I love, and who I want to love because I read and what I read than I have ever been in my entire life. Like, I'm not even joking that, like, when I'm reading a book and I'm like, damn, I love that she's freaking, like, Aelin in Throne of Glass, like, I watch her do things and she is powerful and she stands up to what she wants and she knows what she wants in the bedroom and not. And it is like, damn, I want to be her. It's like, it's empowering to have someone to look at and be like, I want to live her life. And it's, before it was like, oh no, she's reading that book. And now it's like, oh hell yeah, she's reading that book. Like, go her.
When I was younger, I did not know what fan fiction was, nor did I know that I was reading it as I was like taking it in. But one of my cute little things that I did was I would go on YouTube and I would look up like Nick Jonas, Miley Cyrus love story, very like fan fiction. What would it be like to be like POV in their shoes? And I just remember the drama in these like YouTube PowerPoint slides. And then Nick took her in his arms and laid her on the bed of the tour bus. And then cut to like 2 years later and they had like their first child. And it's so dramatic because she's like 18 and then someone spills.
Yeah. Tiff, Kelsey really covered why we're here. I think when a lot of people think about smut or romance novels, the first thing they think of is 50 Shades of Grey. Is that what we're here to talk about?
Holy shit, we are not here to talk about 50 Shades of fucking Grey.
Oh, well then I'm leaving.
That's fine. That series is bad for a lot of reasons. It's not a good example of a BDSM relationship. It's not a good example of erotica. The characters are gross and horrible. Overall, it's just a bad book series. E.L. James is a bad person. Like, Stephenie Meyer doesn't need any defenders, but E.L. James stole her whole thing, and then she even started writing some from Christian's perspective, which is wild.
So to clarify for people who don't know, why are you bringing up E.L. James, the author of 50 Shades of Grey, and Stephenie Meyer, the author of Twilight?
Yeah, so to bring it back to fanfiction conversation space, the story 50 Shades of Grey started out as a series on, I think it was fanfiction.net, which is like old school for me personally. It was called Master of the Universe, and it was super crazy long, and it is a Twilight fanfiction where nobody's vampire, nobody's werewolves, it's all just regular people. Christian is Edward. I think her name is It's Anastasia.
Isn't Anastasia or something?
She goes by Anna for the most part. And she is Bella. It's just bad. Like,
Tiff,
don't read it.
Tiff, wasn't it like a lot of it plagiarized from existing fan fiction about Twilight?
Yeah,
as well?
It was.
It was a lot of stolen content, and it was just overall bad.
Don't read it. It's
Don't
awful.
read it.
We have
things.
We have so many better recommendations for you over the course of this. So
there's very
no
literally,
shame.
There's 50 Shades of Grey fan fiction that's better than 50 Shades of Grey, and then you don't give her any money.
Okay, here's the thing too.
deal.
Like, I don't want to shame anyone if that's like the first smut book they read, because it is one of the first popular ones. So like, it's not your fault that you didn't know that E.L. James is garbage, but there's so much better work out there, and we're really excited to share it with you.
Okay,
so,
but also, how many people, because I know I read 50 Shades as a Twilight fanfic, or read it, or saw the movie, and people were like, oh god, you saw 50 Shades? Like,
there was also shame associated with that for sure. Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
there was. I remember telling someone that, like, oh my god, I just saw 50 Shades, and someone was like, "Are you old enough to see that? Isn't it a porno?" Like,
yeah,
no.
There was an aspect of shame.
It's not a porno. It's just a bad movie.
That's fair.
Oh no, just the song from The Weeknd. It was like Worth It or something.
Yep.
No, what was
and
it
there's
called?
the Ellie Goulding.
Oh my god.
Is it?
Yeah, dude. Like, I just remember I was literally at summer camp volunteering with my friends, and we were all just like drifting through the woods, holding a Bluetooth speaker, listening to this.
Are you sure there wasn't something in the water?
We were pretty horny, I bet. So,
There are some really good things to come out of 50 Shades of Grey, I think. But that doesn't mean that the source material is any good, which I think kind of goes back to a lot of things associated with this genre and with also just like fiction in general that people our age are really into at this point. Like, we're learning a lot more about certain aspects of certain people that are maybe not so great and downright horrid and bad. And now here we are, having grown up liked those things, and there are good things that have come out of it, but that doesn't mean that the thing itself is any good.
Are we talking about...
We're talking about J.R.R. Tolkien, right?
Yeah.
Like, Tolkien's really bad.
I was thinking about J.K. Rowling, but
Well,
that's fine too.
Do you mean Jolkien, Rolkien, Tolkien? Don't slander him in my
Not
home.
in this good Christian household.
I was going to say, the other reason that we really wanted to talk about this is because obviously the show that PJ and I normally do, we haven't read anything that even has like real romance in it, right? And so like we just haven't hit one of those series. I've got a couple that we even put up to be voted on, and they ended up losing compared to some other series. So we started off with Red Rising, and now we're currently in Mistborn. But we wanted to, because Lindsay has read these, we wanted to kind of at the very least give a little bit of a preface as to how the show connects and kind of the interesting thing there. So.
Right, like Red Rising is sexy, but it doesn't have sex. Right. And Mistborn is like taking a fucking cold shower. I love Sanderson with my entire heart. And he's one of the few male authors, and I'll bring this up later at some point, but he's one of the few male authors who doesn't do a shit job writing female characters. But there's nothing sexy about the Mistborn novels, and that's great. And I love that for the Mistborn novels. But we're here to talk about explicitly sexy novels.
Yes. I think the maybe only real, like there's a moment that we can't talk about because you haven't finished that last book yet, but there is like Apollonius in Iron Gold, of which you just finished. And like he is, I know I sent the photo to the group of that sticker with the NSFW thing right over his dick. That is Apollonius. That was a fan art drawing that got sent to me as like a little like piece of mail because we made a joke about it. But he's just this bronze god of like, and it is very sexy, but there's nothing about it outside of appeal.
Right, but it's like empty sexy, right? It's like seeing the latest Dolce & Gabbana ad sexy instead of something that really makes you feel something in your soul.
Right.
What a good comparison. Yes.
That was great.
Thank you.
That was a great thing. So I also just wanted, with that same degree, to talk about like Cut to Black in general, because I think that fits into the intro. Lots of fiction. And I don't think that this is strictly, the more that I've thought about it, originally I was like, yeah, it's a bad thing. But the more that I think about it, it's almost better to not write it if you're not talented enough to write something and provide representation than it is to fuck it up and provide like a misrep.
Yeah. I mean, we're adults. I want to read about an adult relationship, and my adult relationships involve sex. So
yeah, that's why I love the Greenbone saga so much, is because that's like a huge critical point for two characters, is their relationship and how that changes between the three books, and how you can tell that someone has been seriously impacted by a lie and a decision by one character to another from book to book to book. And it's like a 20-year relationship too, which is also unique. Like age in a relationship is an interesting thing. Anyway, want to move away from that because I've pitched that book series enough in my life. I love it. I recommend everyone here read it. But though. It's so fucking
Yeah, I just
good.
put it on my Goodreads.
So
like,
fucking good. Jade City is so good. Jade War is incredible.
I literally just bought Mistborn. Like
Mistborn is great. Mistborn's great.
Like in this moment, you just bought Mistborn?
Like 2 days ago, I was at a bookstore and it was like $5, and I was like, done.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. That's awesome.
But okay, but on your point perspective, Kelsey, about like being adults and like adult relationship, I'm going to take a drink because I'm going to reference a Harry Potter fan fiction that I'm reading right now. So it's a 550,000 word slow burn called Measure of a Man. Wow. It's by In a Days 22. So it's 42 chapters and I'm 39 and she's releasing it every 3 weeks and every chapter is significantly long. Like it's 550,000 words right now. A while, like they're fully adults, but it's really nice because it doesn't just like chapter 1 is not them just banging. Like it's not immediately them getting it out and doing their thing. It's like realizing that like trusting each other and going through their trauma and understanding like who they are and what they've gone through makes them like and they get it's slow burn. So like they don't even get together in the first 15 chapters. But like, sex is a part of their relationship because it's intimate and because it's like the moment of like, I trust you and you trust me. And that's like the whole thing, is that it takes them 20 something chapters for him to let her in and for her to be comfortable with someone after she's had all this stuff happen in her life. And it's like, sex is not like sexy smut, like, woo, for this. It's like, it's a feeling of like, I trust this person. I trust them enough with me to like do the most intimate thing possible with them.
And it sounds like it's necessary to the plot to develop their relationship. So love it.
I love that. I think we're going to move into we definitely have like a whole thing that we want to get through, but I think the biggest way to pitch this is to start with the historical, right? So we get the why, now it's the history of how we got to where we are today, including all the way through fan fiction and things like that, and that's how we're going to kind of navigate this conversation. So again, Lindsay and Kelsey chatting about this, and anyone else jump in when necessary.
So romance novels, date all the way back to Jane Austen, which some people might consider romance, some people might not. But right, these witty, heartbreaking, female-focused, just beautifully written, lush novels about the trials and tribulations of the heart. Romance author Sarah Mclean argues that the modern era of romance started in the 1970s with a woman named Kathleen Woodweiss. Not sure how to say her last name.
Yes, very nice.
I like a Woodweiss, yes.
That's cute.
Sarah Mclean is an author who wrote books like Bombshell, Heartbreaker, Daring and the Duke, Beauty and the Beast, Brazen and the Beast, that kind of thing.
I was going to say.
Thank you. I won't get too deep into it because Sarah actually talks all about this herself on an excellent 99% Invisible podcast episode called The Clinch that you should definitely check out to get a deeper dive on this.
So just to bounce off of Lindsay, and I need to be upfront that Lindsay did all of the work in terms of the research of this. So I'm going to read from her notes, but I don't want anyone to think that Lindsay did this work. I just have a really nice voice sometimes. But basically, Kathleen got really pissed that none of the like fun, whimsical, badass, exciting books she saw at the bookstore had female protagonists. Like there weren't women reading these, like leading these stories that she was passionate about. So she was like, fuck it, I'm going to write one. And so romance became this genre where women were really powerful agents of their own destiny. All those cheesy covers kind of came a little bit later. And this episode we'll talk a little bit about. Oh, is this the Clinch episode?
The Clinch episode.
Yeah, so that Clinch episode talks all about, that kind of trajectory of the romance genre. And according to Lindsay, it's really interesting and I need to really read it. But they were this really loud no boys allowed sign on the front door, because what guy is going to pick up Fabio? Because toxic masculinity is like, not on my watch, shirtless man. But basically it became, okay, which led to, of course, the societal disdain, because anything that women really like en masse, like we talked about earlier, automatically becomes something that's socially abhorred or less than or cheesy or stupid.
Yeah, the 99% Invisible podcast quotes Julia Quinn, who's the writer of Bridgerton, which is now also a show that I put off for the longest time. But it's worth the watch and it's worth the read. But Julia Quinn, the author, said, quote, "Other genres get judged by the very best of their writing, and romance novels get judged on the very worst of it often." And I just think that's so true, right? Today we have some authors who are absolute experts at prose and just write these beautiful, lush novels. And there's others, who are just here to help us all have a good time. And that's awesome too. But recently there's been this huge resurgence in the romance novel, and I really think we need to give it another chance. So here we are in the year of our Lord 2022 with modern romance novels bearing everything from these cute illustrated covers with, like stick people or drawings on the front, to sexy, suggestive fruit, to dimly lit pictures of furniture on the covers. And people are buying them en masse once again. Social media has actually had a huge impact on the romance novel's return. So I'm going to kick it back to Mary to talk a little bit about Book Talk and how Book Talk has helped her get back into reading.
Okay, I did say it in the group chat, but when you guys kept saying en masse, I really wanted to be like, do you mean Sarah Mass?
Wait, can we get a sound clip? Can we get a sound clip of Mary saying it just like that? And can you just insert it somewhere, please?
Okay, so for many of us when we were younger, we were all the readers who were sitting in a corner, not always reading the Harry Potters and the Percy Jacksons and the Divergent and the Hunger Games, but sometimes getting off into like other little niches, like Addie with her Your Name fanfic, or Kelsey with perhaps accessing some feminist porn at a young age. No one knows, but it seems like maybe that happened. And I don't know about you guys, but I felt like I kind of started to burn out on reading as we went into like later into high school and college, because reading turned from a hobby into like academia. And the last thing I wanted to do was turn something that I loved so much that like kind of got me through childhood and like made me the person that I was into this chore. So I kind of stopped reading for a while. Except for like the summers when you do like your annual, Harry Potter reread, or whatever. But, Book Talk kind of changed that for me because the reasons. But yeah, so I don't know. I downloaded TikTok like month 2 of the Hannah Montana pandemic. And I had like Book Talk creators just like immediately show up on my For You page. And I was like, oh my God, is this like TikTok telling me I need to like read again? Like, this is crazy. And I felt like kind of seen by an algorithm in a really weird way. And it was kind of like the little fire under my butt I needed. And I started following along with like these Book Talk things. And I heard about this Akatar, Akatupitu book series. And I was like, that sounds kind of cool, but I have no idea what that means. Like,
Does
what
Mary
is it?
have to take a drink?
Not for
Because
this. This was
That's
within
right,
category.
she
Yeah, this is within
I know,
category.
I know.
Yeah. But she's doing it anyway, like a hero.
Yeah, like a champ.
We love the dedication.
Like Cassian's little bitch.
Ooh, don't threaten me with a good time.
Yeah, right? Daddy Cass. Anyway, so yeah, I talking in circles. But basically, I started seeing like creators like Caven Books and Taylor's Book Talks and Imagine This Life with Me, and they all had like these POVs, like your name, this is like you in these scenarios. And I was like, I'll get some tinglies. My goodness. I'm like, what is this? And I really like kind of dove into it on almost like reversed. Like, I feel like a lot of people, they read the book and then they like go seek out this like fan art and these POVs, but they came to me first and then I went to them. So that was kind of nice. It was like I had like part of the work already done for me. So, Book Talk now like is full of creators like roasting characters for tropes. Like, I am going to talk about Akatar for the millionth time, but like there's this funny thing that like Feyre, who's allegedly this painter,
Allegedly,
always roasts Feyre for her painting and like shows like stick figures and like these fucking like kindergarten level.
Sarah said she was a painter.
She
never
said
said she was a good
Yes.
painter.
This is my favorite.
Here's
This is my favorite trend on Book Talk right now, is like assuming that Feyre is a shit painter, and it's so funny.
okay. What's crazy too is like so Book Talk especially and Akatar specifically have completely influenced, and I'm gonna pull out like my social media marketing brain is like, when you go to Barnes & Noble or you go to an independent bookstore, they have a table at Barnes & Noble for Book Talk. And they have like lists for Book Talk. And so it's like Book Talk is completely, and like, I know I was reading the wrong genre of books before I started getting into fantasy. I was reading like the book of the month. This book is going to change your life books. And I was like, okay, I already have
The
mental
Oprah
illness.
list,
I already have mental
yeah.
illness. Like, I don't need someone to tell me about theirs. Like, I already am anxious enough. Like, I don't want someone to tell me about
no
their
one needs
anxiety.
Frederick Bachman in their life. Right.
Yeah, like, I don't want to read about some girl who's, like, gonna change her life because she got a new job. Like, bestie, we all do that. Like, welcome to the club. And everybody read Akatar, and everybody suddenly liked to read fantasy again. And it was like, I cannot explain to you how many people I know that did not read at all. And then they read Akatar, and then suddenly they have joined the club. And it's like, you say, what do you recommend I read? And like, I remember I hadn't talked to Lindsay, and like, you and I have talked like a lot, but like, it had been a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, like, we started talking, and then we started talking Akatar and fan fiction. And it was like, oh my gosh, we like to read. And Kelsey saw me on Goodreads, and like, Kelsey texted me, and we hadn't talked in 5 years. Like, and then like, we became friends, like, not friends again, but like, we became closer because
We
both had been
reconnected.
reading the same thing. And
Yeah.
now it's like, everybody is reading these same book talk books or whatever you want to call them, and suddenly like everybody's like,
It's a community up here.
I think Tiff even made this joke and comment in the chat that was going on, but like the burnt out to reading ACOTAR pipeline, right? And I think that is actually burnt out to like reading and talking with your friends about it is like a super thing like other readers. I totally think that that's real.
Absolutely. And like I feel like that's something that we were all kind of missing. And that's what Book Talk gave us, was an opportunity to like talk about books and have a community, especially during like a panorama when that was lacking, you know? So, but yeah, Lindsay and I were even talking about it as like a way to like reclaim your inner child and like kind of do a little bit of healing and figure out like, hey, like maybe you didn't have the pals to talk about the books you loved when you were a kid, but have we got a show for you? Let's get it. So that's awesome. And I even think about like with Book Talk, like now there's like going to be like events and cons like based around like these popular book talks. Like book talk balls are like gonna happen, which by the way, fuck me up. Let's go. Right. That's when I'm so
we literally are gonna go. We're going.
No, we're going.
So there was a question in the group chat while we were recording about whether or not Crossland eats pussy. And I have someone here to answer that question.
Oh my God.
Does Crossland eat pussy?
He's
Is she stunned into silence?
This is my roommate and Crossland's ex-girlfriend, Alexandra Lyron.
Hi, Kross.
Hi, how are you? What a moment.
She can't hear you talking.
I know.
I have headphones.
Tell Alex that I say hi.
I'll say
does
hi.
he or
Hello.
Hi.
We're having the same reaction.
She was stunned speechless, so I think he eats it well.
Yes. Oh, I got the headphones.
No, she has headphones so she can hear.
How much do you want to bet that Kross edits all of that out of the final episode?
Like,
No, he deletes everything and only publishes the yes. Crossland.
At the very least, it reflects well on him as like a
It's true.
feminist.
It's true.
This
man was written by a woman, ladies and gentlemen.
Dude, I live for groups of women making fun of Kross. Take a drink.
That is actually one of the
yeah.
rules here. So that's actually
That's what we're all here
it's only
for.
a crazy extra dig that you just showed up out of nowhere.
Wait, so did we get a real answer?
Are you lying because
No,
I
I'm
was
not
on
lying.
national podcast TV?
let
Oh
the
my
record
God.
show Kross. Like,
No, but I have other embarrassing stories if we want to
my
revisit
God.
this. I have many, so.
Come back in like 3 drinks.
Miss Addie, talk to us about Spotify playlists and their relation to book talk and or fanfic. Go.
I started making playlists because I read books and I read fan fiction, and I found that I wanted to listen to something, and I have a really kind of brain where like I listen to a song and I have kind of like what we call plot bunny. Like I have a moment in my head of like, oh my gosh, this is a song that like this character represents. So I have put a link in my bio on TikTok of like playlists for each character and then playlists for books that I read. But like if you go on Spotify or you go on Apple Music or YouTube Music, if you're a peasant and like you are trying to find something, you can literally find a playlist for every single character that you have ever dreamed of wanting to like, or like you can find really specific playlists. Like there's even a playlist like songs that Hermione Granger would listen to after a breakup with Draco Malfoy. Like there are playlists like that, and they have hundreds of thousands of likes on them. Or like I have one that has 200 and something likes, and it's classical Draco Malfoy, and it's like classical songs that I listened to growing up because I played piano and violin. Like, which by the way, it is canon that he does play piano. I would just like to say, but like there are playlists now and audiobooks, and I will shout out like ETL Echo, which is Enemies to Lovers Echo. Like they are an audiobook company that reads fan fiction and puts it on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and it's by far the easiest way for like anybody to get into it. Like that's how so many of my friends have walked in the door of like getting back into reading again.
Not for the podcast, but for my own personal knowledge, quick, Addie. What is the website that reads fan fiction?
I use ETL Echo. I'll put it in the chat. It's ETL Echo, and that's like Bring Him to His Knees is in progress. Like Remain Nameless is on there. The Right Thing to Do. I just listen to Wait and Hope and Beginning and End on there.
Does this person just like it's like one person that does it for fun?
Yeah, she does it for fun. I have friends who are writers. Like, I have a friend who is a very decently popular writer, and like, her Charlie Hermione is like one of my favorite books I've ever read. Fucking hell, you fucker.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep you on that train all night. That was not the right thing to say.
For a drink, but
yeah, Mary, you were about to say something, though. I cut you off.
No, you're fine. I'm setting myself up for a drink here, but with like the book talk to Spotify pipeline or whatever relationship, if you will. That one song that plays before any like images of like Valaris, the like take me. You know what I'm talking about, Lindsay?
Oh yeah,
the, like the take me home song.
What? Oh! On Book Talk, yes.
Yeah, it just makes me want to cry.
Yes,
That's all. I'll drink now.
That's so good.
So the next thing that we're going to go into is we are definitely going to talk about the differences, because there are gradients here, right? Like even as we've been talking about it so far, we've already kind of started to define some of these things. So I guess where do we want to begin with defining these as the kind of spectrum of tastes that they are? We
spent an inordinate amount of time prepping for this podcast, trying to come up with some sort of gradient between different genres, right? So I think if we're talking about the very far left, the very tamest of the tame of the gradient we're going to be tackling today, we have young adult. And we'll get into more what these mean along the way. Next to young adult, we have new adult. And then you get into romance. After romance, you get into smut. And after smut, you get into erotica, or as Kross called it, pulp smut. And he'll explain that later. But within
That's
all of these...
But you did a little giggle.
Drink. And within all of those 5 like main overarching categories, obviously there's tons and tons of little faction categories that we might get into as well. But there's also all these tropes and trends. So we're going to have a rapid fire round where we're all just going to throw out our favorite tropes and trends in some of these romance, smutty books. For instance, right now we're seeing a lot of Hades and Persephone retellings. We're seeing a ton of enemies to lovers. What else is there?
Only one bed.
Reverse harems.
Who did this to you?
Broody boys.
Touch her and die.
I was sworn to protect you.
Pining.
Pregnancy.
Forced proximity for sure.
Coworkers.
Ribbed monster.
Kelsey, take a drink.
I was gonna say ribbed monster dick, cause baby, sign me the fuck up.
Trauma bonding.
I wanted to expand, like, the enemies to lovers is good, but I really love the enemies to neutral to friends to lovers, like, with the extra steps in between.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's nice.
That's nice, but I also love hate fucking.
Yeah,
so I like enemies.
That's great too.
Best Served Cold has some good hate fucking. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not saying that isn't good, but I'm like, I also love the, like, enemies to enemies who are fucking.
Enemies to enemies.
To, like, lovers who are fucking.
It's like
lovers.
Kim Possible and Sheila were for sure fucking.
Oh my god.
For sure.
Yes.
Wait, is Kim Possible enemies to lovers?
It
With
should
Shigo in our dreams. In our
Kim
fucking
Possible
gay-ass
Shigo
dreams.
fanfic. I'm writing it.
Go, Lindsay.
So before we get into kind of breaking down some of these genres, what's everyone's favorite euphemism for genitals?
Seed.
Velvet wrapped steel.
Jesus Christ.
Member.
My mound, or the area where my stomach meets my hips.
Oh, God.
So I was just talking to my friends about this the other day because my friend was writing a smut scene and I was reading it and I was like, it's really nice because so many authors talk about like she realized her nipples were pebbling in her dress. I'm like, I don't know about you guys, but like I don't walk down the street like, oh, my nipples are pibbling. Like I don't like
That's legit right there.
she was like my breasts were overflowing through my dress, and like I'm not walking down the street like, are my nipples bubbling like a jacket? Like so many writers write it like, and it's like I know it's supposed to be beautiful for the girl and the guy and like or whatever the couple is, but like sometimes it really bothers me that like they write it.
No, I hear you, but my nipples are sensitive as fuck, and sometimes when I'm turned on, they could cut glass, and I'm here to, like, relate to that.
But do you walk down the street and say, oh, they're pebbling?
Well,
pebbling?
Okay, the most important question is, did a man write that, or did a woman?
A woman.
If a woman wrote it, I mean, if I get horny, I'm like, oh shit, my nipples are hard.
Walking
I'm literally
down the
grabbing my
street,
boobs
nipples
right
first.
now. I do walk nipples first, you know it.
You gotta roll them forward,
I think one of my
That's a drink.
favorite genital euphemisms is when usually female authors will write, he advanced towards my bundle of nerves. And I'm like, girl, you have a bundle of nerves all over your body. Which one are you talking about? It's the center, but
get more specific.
Warmth in her center, arousal in her center.
Or when it's a chapter written from the male's perspective and he's like, I went into her wet heat. And I'm like, oh!
To help.
Blip.
Tip to help, baby.
Oh, yeah. Like,
Oh, it was like she felt warmth at the bottom of her stomach. And I was like, my stomach does not go that far down, but all right.
Tiff, what were you trying to bring in?
Oh, yeah.
Just with Lindsay's bundle of nerves, I also don't like when they refer to the clit as a button.
Press it.
Oh my God. Don't push it. Don't. That's not how that works.
Morse code. It's Morse code. They're spelling out "you're hot" on your clit.
You're asking like a bunch of like gamer raised men at this point to like just spam that X button. Like that's
Right?
really
but
unfortunate.
that's not the way.
That's not how it works. That's not how it works. I'm saying that's why you don't call it a
Good.
button. Like,
Cross, I was about to take
No,
back my
yeah,
comment
no,
of
no.
you being a man written by a woman, and I'm really glad I don't
Appreciate
have
that.
to remove that.
Specifically, wow, what is it? Like thick ropes? Is that it?
thick ropes.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
thick
that's
ropes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
damn.
watched. We both reached our peak, and I watched as his thick ropes covered my abdomen. Like, girl, what? What are you?
Also, is
watching?
he healthy? Like, why is he ejaculating that much? Like, good for you if you've got giant balls, but I'm
He's
a little
taking zinc
concerned.
supplements. Kelsey,
It's
he's taking
zinc.
Has
Yeah,
he not
it's
been
definitely
laid in
zinc.
2 years? Like,
That's too.
anyway.
It's the end of No Nut
I
November.
mean, in the books I'm reading, it might be that he's been stalking her for 3 years, and so he hasn't fucked anyone, and like that I can get behind. I will drink proactively for that. That book is actually called, I just read it, and I literally fucking forgot what it was called, but Stalker Romance for 3 years is... Okay, it's called Vipers and Virtuosos, and it's the second Monster and Muses book, and it's about a guy who stalks her for 3 years before they
two
fuck.
drinks.
So, it's fine.
or just like a long drink.
So I think for a lot of us, and I'm speaking purely from the millennial/zillennial perspective, one of our first intros to romance and maybe even light smut was Twilight. And thankfully for all of you listeners, we have two of the globe's foremost Twilight experts with us on this podcast today, Tiffany Benson and Kelsey McKinney.
I'm going to add that to my... Lindsay, I'm going to add that to my business cards.
Good, you
Business
should.
card, resume, Twitter bio, it all belongs.
All of it.
All of the things.
Tiff, Kelsey, tell us about Twilight.
Oh God, Tiff and I are built for this. I know I talk about porn,
Built
but
for
the
this.
magical thing about Twilight, and I'll let Tiff get into this a bit too, but it's in this beautiful space where it's really sexy and there's like this tension and intense buildup, but they kind of don't do anything. So at a very young age, it was like this exploration of like desire and sexuality without the shame of acting on it. I remember being like, Edward is the consent king. And it's like, or like, boys who are hot, wait, like shit like that. So I think Twilight was this really beautiful spot where you started exploring that tension and that desire, but it was so okay because there wasn't that shame wrapped up in it from my own perspective. But what about you, Tiff?
I totally agree. I think that especially like once you hit Eclipse, I'm talking about the whole Twilight series.
Yeah,
when
we
I talk
better.
about Twilight, by the way. So like when you hit Eclipse and it's Bella who's pushing to have sex and Edward is the one who's like, no, we shouldn't. I think that Lady Stephanie Meyer did something like kind of feminist there where she then, a lot of things that were being written and a lot of the like perspectives that we had at the time were very like, oh, boys just can't help themselves. They're always just wanting to have sex. And it was like, well, Bella's more horny than Edward here. Edward is the one saying, no, we should get married first. And Bella's like, consider.
Oh my God, I love it. And also, I mean, Twilight has come back in just this massive resurgence, especially on Book Talk and in modern media. I mean, literally, I think it was Summit just posted a video of fucking Taylor Lautner. I found out we've been saying his last name wrong this entire time. Taylor Lautner saying, "Where the hell have you been, Loca?" again. And it's
he
just
said it
like,
on Jimmy Kimmel. He said it on Jimmy Kimmel.
What?
Important
It's
side note.
amazing.
Super important side note. Taylor Lautner just proposed and is engaged to a woman named Taylor. So it will be the Taylor's Lautner.
The
I'm
Taylor's
uncomfortable.
Lautner. Oh.
Like when he was dating T-Swift.
That's fair.
Yeah, this kind of resurgence is like this kickback to nostalgia and these like feelings of being of like your first love, and that like I still remember the first time I read Twilight, all the books, and like the butterflies I got, and I still get them every time I reread them. That like boost of just like, oh, you love someone so much for the first time. And I also, Tiff, I want to mention. You mentioned Eclipse, and it immediately made me think of the scene that all of us went fucking feral for, where Edward hooks Bella's knee, like, over him, and it was like, it was literally just a knee hook, and he, like, maybe, like, pulled his hand up her calf, and it was the most erotic thing I had ever read, and I was just, like, in ruin.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, that was... I think that the other great thing about Twilight being so, like, kind of innocent but also sensual was that it was very specifically geared towards teen girls. And moms also, because, you know, moms sometimes have to read the things that their teen girls are going to read. And, like, the idea that it was something very specifically geared towards a population who very frequently is hated on, and it was something that was so, like, unabashedly for teen girls and like young girls, and this really interesting place for them to kind of explore the idea that like true love conquers all in the end, no matter what. And it's such an interesting, cool way to, well, I think it's cool because I'm 26 and still read them every year, at least once a year.
I mean, it's so
just,
go ahead.
No,
it's so funny too though how it like, and we'll get into this later in the pod too. I think there was, you know, the classic like Team Edward, Team Jacob fight, right? And I remember being in high school, and I was into Twilight in high school. I may or may not have allegedly made T-shirts with puff paint that were Team Edward for one of the premieres, right? And taken pictures that if people care enough, we can share with the audience. But I think it's so interesting, right? Because as a 14-year-old or whatever, 15-year-old, I was like, oh, Edward is this pinnacle of love. He's protective. He's jealous. He's so obsessed with Bella. You know, he wants what's best for her. And now as an adult, as somebody who's 28, I look at that and I'm like, that is a walking red flag, girl. You gotta walk right away. This man is toxic as hell, you know? And so it's interesting how it has evolved and kind of provided this on-ramp for different types of romance novels.
Yeah, I want to add that I think the people who are fans of Twilight now hate on it just as much as we love it. Like, we recognize, I think the reason it's re-blown up again is we recognize the faults in it, and we talk a lot about them, and we can kind of laugh along with this thing that we love. Like, we're not saying it's bad or that it's stupid to like it or it's embarrassing. It's that, hey, here's this thing that we really enjoyed. Here are the problems with it, and like, let's talk about why that's problematic. Like,
do you ever feel like maybe we do that because we're women and we have to like make fun of the things we enjoy to feel like it
damn Mary
valid?
One dropping truths.
Yes.
Snaps.
You know what
That's
I
a
mean?
fair question.
Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like, no, you made perfect sense.
No, I mean, the fact is that we gatekeep things to our friends. Like, they're like, oh, well, why didn't you tell anybody? Or like, same with like Twilight. It's like, we were gatekeeping. Like, we were totally high school gatekeeping.
Well, so when I'm talking about like holding it accountable, like, let's talk about the fact that Jacob imprinted on an infant, and there are other characters who
about that.
there's a lot of parts of the books that don't hold up to like standards
modern
of
scrutiny.
a lot of like there's a lot of things that we need to talk about.
Strict scrutiny.
Yeah, like we need to be critical about this thing that we love, and that's okay. Like, we can still love it and still talk about its faults, but still enjoy it. So that's kind of the discourse that I enjoy with Twilight. And also, if you're really familiar more, the big hit show is a podcast on Spotify by Alex Papademos. I have no idea if I'm saying his name wrong or right. I listened to the show and I should fucking know, but it goes into the like insanity of Twilight because they did not expect it to blow up, because with the movies, of course, if women like something, they're not going to buy tickets and they're not going to show up, and things that girls like don't matter. So that's a really neat podcast about why it blew up and why women's interests are fucking valid.
Yeah. Speaking of podcasts, there's a podcast that I also really enjoy called Gender Forking that is them reading through all of the Twilight books. And in that, they are both women's studies majors who have master's degrees in that, and they both work in, like, domestic violence work. They do outreach for domestic violence. They do all of these things that have to do with preventing and helping folks out of situations that are harmful to them with partners. And they take a very critical lens to some of the things that happen. And they frequently talk about how much, oh my God, I love Edward, but also like, fuck that guy. He's the worst. And in a lot of those things, I don't know, Kelsey, if you've kind of encountered it, there's this very specific charity that they plug a lot in Twilight podcasts that I have listened to at least, called the Move to Higher Ground campaign.
Yes, this is so important. Please talk more about it, Tiff. Please, please, please.
Yeah, so the Quileute tribe, which is a real tribe that Stephanie Meyer borrowed the name from, and then pretty much nothing else, is a real tribe that really lives in that area of Washington. And they, due to climate change and tourism and a lot of other things, especially COVID these days, are trying to relocate a lot of their living spaces because of deterioration of cliffsides and rising sea levels. So they also do a lot of tourism stuff for Twilight. There's a lot of people who go and visit La Push Beach, and that is on their sacred land. When you purchase a Twilight thing, I have made it a practice, at least in my personal life, to then make a matching donation to the Move to Higher Ground campaign. I like to make sure that other people who also like Twilight know about it, because they don't receive royalties. They haven't received royalties. They don't receive anything from Stephanie Meyer. They don't receive anything from Summit Pictures. They don't receive any compensation for probably like the bastardization of their culture. So donate to Move to Higher Ground.
Absolutely.
So glad you brought that up.
Can you
So
tell me
glad.
where I could find that? Like, is that do you find it on Twitter, or is there a website, do you know of?
We'll provide a link inside of the show notes. If you can give me a link, Tiff, I'll add it so that it will be within the show notes so that people can donate. And then on top of that, we'll replug it at the end so we can get really specific with that information.
It is mthg.org, so it's super easy, but we'll also give the link.
Yeah, just in case, With that, I think that brings us from this kind of intro Twilight into young adult.
I would love to hit one more thing about Twilight.
No, fire
real
away,
fast. I know Lindsay and I think Kelsey kind of talked about like the history of romance and how the origins of like popular romance novels go back to the 70s. I truly believe that Twilight is the reason why like millennials and Gen Z are now getting so into romance.
Without a doubt.
Like during the Twilight heyday the first time, do you guys remember the book covers that looked suspiciously like Twilight books?
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the fake Twilight covers.
I think
And
Jane
they
Eyre
were-
got like Twilight covers. Like Wuthering Heights got a Twilight cover.
I have a Wuthering Heights copy that has that cover, and it says like Edward and Bella's favorite book, which like number one. But it like I think that is a large part of why like people our age are getting into romance and stuff again, because during the past, several years, there's been a lot of things that have been really traumatizing, and going back and healing your inner child and healing your inner teen has been a lot of resorting back to those things that were comforting when you were younger. And Twilight is a thing that was very comforting for a lot of us. And so I think that is definitely part of why like ACOTAR and other big fantasy romance series are getting so popular again.
Yeah, that.
I can't agree more. Like, I think that Twilight is ultimately responsible. No, I agree with you. I think that it totally, like, we're all left speechless because you delivered this perfectly, but I think that
Agreed.
the interesting note here is that I think it is very influential. It did also influence E.L. James to do, like, as we've mentioned before, like, the reason that it's so pervasive and the reason that 50 Shades is so pervasive is it took that tension and ratcheted it up to where everyone thought it could have gone, but in an incorrect direction, right? So that's the reason that we ended up getting that spinoff, and I think that makes a lot of sense as to people's interests. Yeah. With that, we move in from kind of that intro into young adult, the sort of starting point for a lot of these. I have a couple of things to add here too, I think, but
You go first, boo boo.
oh my God, mine are not that cool. I was going to say, like, I remember reading a lot of young adult books and that kind of being like my latching in point into enjoying these kind of things and really paying attention to characters, I think, first and foremost, which is something that I think young adult transitions you into, is really caring about characters. And there are a number of different series. I'm definitely not going to step on the ones that you're going to talk about, but Uglies was a big one.
Oh my God,
caring
yes, I
about
forgot
people,
about
right?
those.
Scott Westerfield,
Oh my
right?
God, I forgot about that
I
completely.
literally
Yeah, right? Like, totally fits inside of this young adult category for me, and that's one that I think about all the time. Finally becoming a movie, by the way, so that I think is coming out next year. Yeah, or this year. Yeah. But regardless, I think that lots of these, like, young adult conversations, this is the entry point into something being more interesting and getting involved with these characters and kind of the will they, won't they, and they're never going to because it was written for, you know, a target audience. And so it kind of is like the definition of like young adult edging in its own way. Always, like, it's always there. So, yeah.
I don't think you can say that phrase, Crossland.
Yeah. If you would like a book with edging in it, as a recommendation, one I haven't read yet but is highly recommended is The Dare by Harley Larue, which is a dark romance with apparently a great edging scene. So
that's awesome.
Anyway, can we talk about young adult books? I want to hear about young adult.
Okay, I feel like such a dummy because I can't remember the author of The Hunger Games.
Suzanne Collins.
Thank
Please
you.
make that a TikTok sound.
That's so funny. Make that a fucking TikTok sound.
So, give me a minute. Okay, so a lot of young adult stuff, at least, that in my girly group, and I'm assuming in others, we all kind of got into that, like, dystopian, like, girl who's so average, very similar to Bella, like, gets, like, greatness thrusted upon her, and she's just like, what?
Thrusted.
Thrusted. It's an ASMR podcast.
Mary might gut you. Anyway.
Yeah, so I feel like for a lot of us, when we were reading in like middle school and high school, we had these young girls who were about like, you know, 16, 17 seemed to be kind of like that sweet spot of like, hey, you're old enough where you can like make out with a dude and like feel some feelings, but not quite where it's appropriate to like hear about you boning a dude. And also as a reader, that's what the author was like trying to, her audience was, you know, just a little bit of like emotional edging, as we've mentioned. Like, ooh, I feel some feelings in my low tummy tum, but we'll just leave it there. So with that, there are like characters like
these feelings coming from.
God damn it, Lindsay.
there are characters like Katniss from the Hunger Game or Mare from the Red Queen, like that like have these relationships, but also at the same time are like dealing with like these dystopian power struggles where they're like suddenly forced to take down an entire government at the ripe age of 16. And like, we can all relate to that, of course. So it's interesting that young adult, like not necessarily similar to the other series that we read that are in different genres, like young adult, I think almost kind of rarely has like romance as the main plot point. And it's usually female protagonist saves the world. And also she has a hottie with a body. So, but
Red Queen was Mare, right? Her name was Mare.
Yeah, so it's Mare, and then actually, sidebar. I was gonna jump. No, I'll do Katniss first. Okay, so Katniss, I feel like, which is so interesting with like Team Peeta or Team Gale, like we kind of came at that series with the same like Team Edward, Team Jacob energy, despite the fact that Katniss like was like Team I want my sister to not die. Yeah. Team, I'm kind of asexual until suddenly I'm not at the end. Team, President Snow wants to murder my family and I'm going to get in the sleeping bag with Peeta because he might die. And like, despite knowing
indecision.
Yeah, team indecision.
More like team using romance for her own like personal gain, which I think is fucking rad.
No, it is. And
the fake pregnancy trope.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing too. Like she has so many things just like happen to her. And I feel like that's a lot of the reason, like, why some of us could relate to Katniss, despite the fact that she kind of has an apathetic view of life, minus like her one instance with Rue and think of things, be so smart. Think of things. What is it?
Think of things. Be so smart.
But anyway, so she, like, as a reader, we kind of like pushed this romance onto her, which I think Suzanne Collins wanted us to do, and the Capitol did, and her family did, and Gale did, and Peeta at some points did. But Katniss was like, I have no mental capacity for that. So it was kind of interesting that like we did that to her. And then at the end, it did kind of turn out that Peeta was like her boo. But I just remember with the specific.
Yeah, because Gale is a war criminal. I just need to say it now.
So yeah, anyway, I don't even know where my brain was going with that. But the one, I think the first like moment in Hunger Games where we all got those little feelings late at night with our book.
What feelings, Mary?
Yeah, right?
Those
Not the
feelings
grocery store.
at the bottom of your tummy.
Like my little tummy feelings
Between the
was
apex of
when
my thighs.
PETA was like literally dying. PETA was dying. He was like half naked because Katniss had to like partially undress him. And then at some point they're like sharing this sleeping bag. And I have this like very vivid memory. So we were doing like kind of book tastings in middle school. And my like teacher had us just read specific chapters out of books to figure like so that we could like kind of get hooked in them. And it wasn't the first chapter. It was like in the middle of the book. And then you're supposed to like ask questions like, okay, what's the setting? What's the time period? What's all these things? And my bookish girl brain went out the door because all I was reading at this Catholic school as a 12-year-old was this girl in a sleeping bag with some guy, and they're like cuddling to keep warm. And I was like, I'm sorry, what was the question? What did you want?
What am I trying to say?
Yeah. So I don't know, like that. It's interesting. Like obviously there's a lack of smut and spice in these young adult books, but we all still felt those feelings because it had that level of intimacy in other ways that I think, got the job done for me. So with that in mind, it kind of, I don't actually even know when Red Queen came out, but I only read it last year, and it does follow with that like Divergent, Hunger Games, like dystopian, uglies, main character has greatness thrusted upon them vibe. And Victoria Aveyard, she talked about really specifically how she chose not to like write smut in her books because one, her like characters are minors, and two, she felt like it wasn't something that she was good at. And she does kind of have that like fade to black moment. Mm-hmm. But what was so like, well, she has love triangle in her the Red Queen series. There's like this really like brooding evil character, kind of Draco vibes that you kind of root for, even though he is the villain, right? But like you still root for him because he's so twisted and he has all this trauma and his relationship with...
Sorry, did someone say Draco Malfoy?
Yeah, no, that's for you, girl. So his relationship with Mare is very like twisted and whatever. And like, you're not supposed to root for them. And yet you're like, but what if? Like, what if? No. But there's still like moments of like spice in these books that don't necessarily have sex. Like, I'm going to read a quote. It's a dramatic telling, if you will. His lips are on mine, hard and warm and pressing. Like, excuse me? What did he say? The touch is electrifying, but not like I'm used to. This isn't a spark of destruction, but a spark of life. As much as I want to pull away, I just can't do it. Cal is a cliff. I throw myself over the edge.
Okay, that's hot.
No, I know. And it's like...
It's so hot, and it's also like, I don't want to read sex between teenagers.
No.
Like, I don't want smut there. I want this, like, feeling of, like, this intensity, this kiss for the first time that means something more than you've ever felt. Like, that's so beautiful about YA.
It is, and it's like, it makes you feel like you're a teenager again, like having your first kiss with your boo, because, like, that's how intense it does feel in
Some
that moment.
Some people really like age gaps, though. Like, age gap trope is a thing.
Fair.
That's fine, but let's have it be past the age of consent. That's my only request.
Yeah, very true. So yeah, the Red Queen series has that bad boy trope, but it also has like kind of enemy slivers, a little bit forced proximity, fake relationship, and just like something I think is different about the young adult versus like fantasy romance is that usually the main character is like destroying the government, whereas like with other fantasy series, they become like a monarch and like are in this ruling class. So kind of interesting too.
They're all anarchists, the original leftists.
The original leftists. They're the reasons we are who we are today.
I just love the TikToks that talk about this genre of books, and it's like an age-old government facing, blah, 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 and terrible things, and then like quick cut to like some 16-year-old girl with a bow and arrow. Like, I just love that it's always, but I mean, that's why we like to read them, because it's the average gal.
Yep.
The everyday woman who didn't know she was the chosen one, and it's more relatable.
It's like our Harry Potter.
It's always like, I've provided for my family, and I am really good with a bow and arrow, and I'm also beautiful, but I don't know it. You can't tell me
I'm
that.
I'm not like other girls.
Right? Other girls like cute dresses and being pretty. I like carnage.
Right. But if there's anything I missed that I should touch on, someone just give me a guiding question, I could do that. So I just scribbled.
No, I think you covered a lot of great stuff. And really, like, you can kind of tie that back into another Sarah J. Maas thing with Feyre. Like, yeah, I just wanted to tie in, like, speaking of girls who, like, don't know they're special, but they, like, have a bow and arrow and are really good at
bow and arrow and a dream.
Carnage and taking care of their family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is a trope that comes with any amount of spice. Like, that's it. Just
Very true. Well, and just to wrap it up, like the selection series too has like that love triangle. It has this kind of like forced proximity thing. It's YA The Bachelor, but with a monarchy, and yet it's futuristic and kind of dystopia, utopia, whatever. Is the writing good? I don't know, but it's a good read.
I don't know.
But it's a read.
It's absolutely a read. Tiff, you wanted to mention something about John Green.
I did. Yeah, I think that modern times, it's kind of fun to, like, shit on John Green a little bit. And it was, like, back in the day, too. Like, Tumblr era, a lot of shitting on John Green. But I do think that, like, John Green probably has a large part to do with the reemergence of romance as well. And especially for, kissing in the Anne Frank house is a bad choice. But he also...
Did you see
he was
his video about that recently, though?
No.
So he did an entire TikTok video about that specific scene, and I wish I
don't think he said it. I still don't. I mean, I have no problems with John Green, but I don't think his description for it was good enough.
No, his description was not good, but like his whole description of like the cigarette between the mouth is like the euphemism for like you are in charge of your own destiny was really, really fascinating. And like
anyway,
John Green books, they were just completely different. Like they were a different breed of book.
Yeah, I really like John Green. I continue to really like John Green. And one of the phrases that has been really impactful on me for my entire life is, in fact, John Green talking about Twilight. And I know that, that's quite a sentence, but that
is a drink for you because we're no longer in the Twilight section.
It is.
But.
Yeah, you're right. It's still young adult, so
yes,
it should
kind of
still count, but it's adjacent. Yeah. But he talks about how Twilight is not necessarily like a good series. It's not a good book. It's not a well-written book, but it is a beautiful thing for young girls and young women and young people to experience because it's a story where, despite everything else that's going on in that world, the love that the two main characters have is the most important thing, and it is what continues at the end of the day, and it is what saves the rest of the family. And that's an important thing for young readers to read and to kind of connect with. And so despite, the, occasional cringiness of anybody over the age of like 40 trying to do content that relates to teens and stuff, but I still think that John Green is a big champion for girls enjoying books and is a large part of why there are girls who enjoyed books then and girls who enjoy books now.
To a similar extent, I want to add in a little bit, like T.J. Klune with The Cerulean Sea is similar, and I think that is young adult and also embracing kind of a gay relationship as well, which, important inside of this to make sure we hit a lot of things. We're hitting a lot of things in terms of recommendations, but in a similar vein, I feel like he's kind of become this like fantasy version of John Green, or is becoming this fantasy version of John Green. I think what's so interesting to me about YA, and then we'll go into classics here, but YA is something that is almost entirely a marketing term. It is meant to be evocative of like a certain period in life, maybe, or something acceptable for a certain audience. But that really just leaves it as a marketing term. As adults, we're welcome to enjoy YA because it is, it's kind of like a time capsule in some ways, in the ways that they're written and things like that. But it's there's nothing wrong with enjoying YA. It's just not for everyone too. So I mean, just like anything else. One thing that I don't think we mentioned in the intro at all, the romance genre is the number one selling genre that there is. So it is also the largest chunk of money that is made in books.
Is it really?
It is. It's number one.
I did not know
by
yet
a lot.
It doesn't get the respect it fucking deserves.
Right.
No.
It's so annoying.
Because misogyny.
Right.
Ugh.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just realized that we forgot to bring that up earlier.
Even
Thanks, Kross.
it makes sense. Like, you think about what gets consumers to buy and be engaged. It's like you get married, you get a kid, or someone dies. Like, that's just like TV, Instagram, TikTok, books, whatever.
You
and
just
it's
broke
like,
down
it's a
everything that I
thing-
love in like one moment.
No, literally. It's like it's fantasy romance. All of those things happen.
Yeah, I mean, and really, like, romance is one of the few genres that, like, that can definitively 100% happen to you.
Right.
That's a
Right.
good point.
Great point. It's really
Like-
easy to
like,
imagine the
I'm never-
fantasy or stretch
Yeah.
yourself into
Like,
the place.
I'm never going to throw a ring into a mountain in New Zealand, but I have, like, gone enemies to lovers, and now we're married. Like, that's
Dude,
something
Dude,
that's
we're
realistic.
an enemies to lovers arc?
Yeah, I
We
need to
do.
know.
We had an
I didn't know that.
we had an
That's
enemies
so
to
good.
lovers arc.
Oh
Okay.
my
Now
God.
we're married.
My relationship, my partner and I are a friends to lovers that hinged on a one bed trope. I'm not even fucking kidding.
When
Like
did
Amazing.
you
Oh my God.
one bed trope?
he stayed over and we stayed up all night looking at each other's Tumblrs and talking, and suddenly it was
Stop.
6 a.m. and I was like, "You can stay." And he was like, "I'll sleep on the couch," and I was like, "No, it's
No.
fine." And we
That's-
literally did that.
A lot of people talk about the origination of the romance genre, dating all the way back to the classics. We have, Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, Jane Austen, Princess Bride, that kind of situation. Mary and Tiff, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think that you kind of spoke to it earlier, Lindsay, and about how those books are a lot of longing. They may not be necessarily, like, explicit or, particularly exciting to modern audiences all the time, but it's full of a lot of angst and longing and desperation and overcoming something to be together. And I think that that is also impactful into what romance is now.
One of my favorite things that my mom actually mentioned about Jane Austen is that you really have no idea what's going on, like, politically, historically, during the time period that she's writing in and, like, the time period that she's in, because for her, like, her perspective was relationships, and it was marriage, and it was family, and it was what women experienced was so different than maybe the male members of their household or, their rich cousins. Like, their concerns were far different than, like, what Jane and her sister, and then obviously the fictional, like, Bennet sisters and so on and so forth, were dealing with at the time. So, like, it's definitely, like, the female gaze, because that's how she operates. And especially, our favorite enemies to lovers is in a Jane Austen book that we all, see as the blueprint. So.
I was literally just going to say, let's pour one out for the 2005 Pride and Prejudice hand flex.
Exactly.
Did you know it was improv? Like, what? The hand flex. The hand flex from Pride and Prejudice. Matthew McFadden improvised it. And it is like it is the most intense fucking scene in that movie. Like, I cannot describe the way I feel when I watch him hold her hand up to the carriage, let go, and then, like, flex his hand because touching her made him feel so intense.
Yep.
Oh,
Well, and that just goes to show, like, just for, like, obviously Jane Austen's books probably have the least amount of smut and spice to the untrained eye, but to a woman
Yes.
or someone who appreciates those, like, or someone in general who just appreciates those, that intimacy and that, like, wanting and the subtlety. It's everything. Like, that's all we use. It's like when you, like, one of my favorite scenes, I'm actually referring to the movie here, so I apologize, but it's all part of the genre. Like, when she's under, in the 2000 version, when she's, like, under the sheets with her sister, and they're, like, giggling and they're, like, talking about it or whatever, like that, for women or just folks in general who, like, are entering a relationship, those little moments, those, like, the looks and the feeling of a muscle as you, like, push past them, and, like, all those things are just as an actual sex scene. So
Yeah, I think that those kinds of stories and those kinds of books and those kinds of scenes are really, that's where we get the phrase, that man was written by a woman. Mr. Darcy is the blueprint for a man who was written by a woman.
Yep.
So that's why we like that today.
yes, ma'am.
100%. And while we have those sort of classics that laid the foundation or laid the blueprint, right, for all the romance novels to come, we also have romantic fiction, which is not to be confused with romance novels. And though they might sound like they're the same thing, they are not the same thing. Mary and Addie, how does romantic fiction differentiate from romance novels?
Okay, I'm literally holding a Nicholas Sparks book in my hand right now. So I recently watched Safe Haven. And so I was like, I'm really interested to see how much this follows the book. So I bought a $5 copy of the book on like Target.com or whatever. It is night and day compared to, like, I will say Nicholas Sparks' Safe Haven. Like, I love Safe Haven because it is a woman getting out of a tough situation, and it is something that, like, well, I don't relate to it, and I have no way to relate to it. Like, I admire that she takes things into her own hands and goes for it. And it's a fade to black in a way that feels very, I hate to say it, but like safe. Like, Nicholas Sparks is like a nice, safe romance book of like, you just want something that you can like sit down and read at the end of the day and you won't have bad dreams. And that's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah. I that was like probably my actual, like, I know we talk about Twilight as like our step into that, but I think I read Nicholas Sparks probably at like slightly too young of an age. But I remember thinking that they were, well, first of all, I felt like kind of less bad about it because he's like a very Christian author. And I was like, see, it's Jesus-y, we're good. Because I was
mean,
like,
the thing about it is like when you read a Nicholas Sparks book, there's nothing bad about, like, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Like when you read The Notebook or you watch The Notebook or you read Safe Haven, I like tying it back to the whole guilt thing and like tying it back to the whole like you're reading smut for the first time. Reading a Nicholas Sparks book, I don't feel weird about putting it on my Goodreads. Like I don't feel weird about like having people see that I'm reading it. When I put something like some monster fucking book or like even like a weird, like, or not weird, but like even a deep romance book, like I feel guilty when my Kindle syncs to my Goodreads and like people from high school see this and like people I went to church with or like my family friends see it. When I put a Nicholas Sparks book on my Goodreads, I'm like, whatever, it's Nicholas Sparks.
At this point, it's like reading Jane Austen. It's just
exactly. Like it's just in the same genre of like, it's almost like what people expected romance to be.
Exactly. Yeah, I do think that's true. Yeah. Like,
Addie, I really want you to, I'm excited for the journey you're on to unwork that shame that you feel about some of those books you're sharing on your Goodreads, because there is nothing inherently shameful about reading this kind of stuff. It's a journey.
I call them like the books that are going to change your life. And that's the only thing they put on their Goodreads. And like the only thing that they put on their Goodreads is like what people want them to know. And like I have mine synced to my Kindle now. So like fan fiction links to it, like Kindle Unlimited links to it. So, and it's even something like I have talked to my therapist about is like not wanting to be judged. Like who the frick cares? Like no one cares what you're reading. And like, it's something I've struggled with my entire life. And like Lindsay and Kelsey have known me since I was in first grade. Like judgment has been something on my mind since I was in first grade. And like putting a Nicholas Sparks book or a fan fiction or whatever on my Goodreads of like currently reading, like just being like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
This is literally me with putting books I have to read for law school on my Goodreads because I have to read all these books that sound like I'm a fucking finance bro investing in NFTs. But I'm like, look, I am reading this book. It's going on my Goodreads. So if you start seeing shit like profit first and getting to yes and getting past no, which sound really sexual, but it's all about running a business. Let me tell you.
Can you read those, then write the fanfic that is sexual with the same title? Like, please.
I love that.
Oh my God, I would love to. That's incredible.
But back to Nicholas Sparks for a second. I grew up a military kid, and like the romanticized South, coastal South is definitely like a big theme in his books. Like they're always in this like small South Carolina town where, you know, there's a nice woman who works at like the convenience store or like the Notebook where it's like old money or whatever. But it's a romantic read because it's summery and it's warm. And the funny thing too is like, yeah, it's written by a man, but the main character is the girl and like her journey most of the time, except for maybe like Dear John, which also was like a fantastic book. Well, I don't know if it was fantastic, but I liked it.
That's a Taylor Swift song. You can't trick me.
Yeah, right. I remember actually feeling very confused when I was like, wait a minute. It's like the Spider-Man meme with the two. But yeah, I definitely felt I don't know, like it gives a sense of like kind of home and like kind of this like classic kind of vibe when you read it. So I did reread Dear John, I think last year actually.
I literally read Nicholas Sparks books for me are like palate cleansers. Like when I'm done with a really, really big series, or like, so right now I'm in the middle of Kingdom of Ash, which is like the last Throne of Glass books. And at the last Throne of Glass book, at the same time, I'm reading Safe Haven by Nicholas Sparks because it's what I like to read before I go to bed. It is. And I'm not going to have bad dreams about spiders. I'm not going to think that someone is murdering me. It is happy. It is PG. The worst thing that happens is finished in one chapter. Yep. Versus some of the books that I read, like they are kidnapped for months on end. And I have read a lot of non-con. Like I've read a bit of non-con and things that are really, really
which we'll get to.
And
which we'll get to.
Like that is something I can't read before I go to bed. And so like Nicholas Sparks is like a nice like palate cleanser before I go to bed. Like, and that's the only way I can describe it.
Definitely a good like get out of a reading slump, and or if you don't want to have sad kidnapped in a coffin nightmares, definitely recommend.
It's the equivalent of like watching an episode of a cartoon after you watch like a super scary movie before you go to sleep, so you don't have bad dreams.
For sure.
That's actually a great comparison.
Absolutely.
One of the other books that I put solidly into the romantic fiction category is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue, which I put off reading until earlier this year, which is just like a beautifully written, lovely novel.
Sounds like prose.
About time travel. It's not even time travel. I'm sorry. Back up. Beautifully written, lovely novel about existing in a world where no one can see you. And there is romance and there is sex, but that's absolutely not the center or even a major plot point, right? It's a novel that has romance. And I think that's really beautiful. I think another thing that sometimes people confuse with romance novels / romantic fiction, because it's widely loved by women, is the book of the month type books. So books like The People You Meet on Vacation, Beach Read, The Roommate, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, no, please, Addie, go on a rant, because these books aren't bad, but they're books that have become stereotypically feminine.
Okay, so book of the month. I've had book of the month for like a year. It first started out with my friend Sarah and I wanted a reason that we could FaceTime once a month. So we started book of the month so we could pick the same book, read it, and then we could do a book club about it. I quickly started realizing book of the month is the kind of book the book is going to change your life. Or this book is so deep, dark, it's going to really change the pivotal perspective that you have. And at first it was like the seven husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation. And for someone like me, anything that was in the romance category was like, okay, this is fine. I've read much deeper stuff, but like everything doesn't need to be like that. And it has quickly become a genre of people or a genre of book talkers that read this book of the month. And I recently even saw a video of someone on Book Talk that said it is Black History Month in February, and they have one book on Book of the Month in the entire thing that is written by a Black woman author. And no hate against Book of the Month. I think that's something that they should have looked at. But like looking at Book of the Month, it is such a different perspective than so many other things, but it has become a norm that like if you read a certain book, you got it from Book of the Month.
Yeah, I think it's important to add the distinction too of the organization of Book of the Month and the books that are included in that program. Because some of those books are like really fucking awesome. Like one of my favorites is The Roommate. That is such a good book. It's this mentality of like, you have to be in the program and reading the books that everyone else is reading to be cool in the book talk community or in the book reading community. And it's like, it's this level of like weird gatekeeping that's happening. And then also it's this really also added layer of a very white perspective in terms of how we read books and what sort of books we're highlighting. I could go on a rant. I've had enough to drink to go on a rant in terms of like our patriarchal structure and the racism that we exist in and like the ways that we are not educated enough in terms of outside of our existence. I mean, So to me, Book of the Month feels like the equivalent of a
very affluent white Anglo-Saxon family who puts a coexist sign in the front lawn of their house on the richest street in whatever major city they live on, right? And they get a book every single month that makes them really feel like they're living up to that NIMBY, not in my backyard pledge that they have to make the world a better place, right? And I'm not saying I'd never, ever want to fault somebody for reading, because I think reading is always excellent. And like, you are better off for reading than you are not reading. But there is something about the book of the month romance style, if we're going to bring it back to romance, right? Romance style, where it's like men or partners or whoever doing the absolute bare minimum and people losing their fucking minds over it and being like, this partner listened to me talk about my trauma. And it's like, yeah, because they fucking should.
So,
you know, or
if you look
this
at like
person
Beach
like
Read,
cared about me just a little bit, and it's like, wow, that's incredible. I hope that happens to you with every person you have in your life. And I think that's where I get frustrated with some of these book of the month books, because they feel, a lot of them are really beautifully written, but they feel very bare minimum, where romance and relationships and expectations of the friends and family in your life are concerned.
if you look at like Beach Read or People We Met on Vacation, I ended up reading, and I had such an issue with it because it was absolutely that. It was absolutely like, you are literally doing the bare minimum as a human being for like respecting this person's feelings. Oh, it was adorable. But
I
like,
liked it.
It was like, but like,
but he called her Tiny Fighter. It was so cute.
oh, call me Fireheart and I will fucking open my legs for you. Like,
I know. Fireheart. We're talking about nicknames. But anyway, no, I think
me spread my seed, if you know what.
Yeah. I think the baseline of a lot of this is that these are, I'm sure, enjoyable good books, but they're not the best of the best, and treating them like the best of the best, or if you're not reading these books, you're not interesting or engaged enough or know enough about what books are happening. Like, it's the gatekeeping and the pedestaling of these kinds of reads that I think feels really painful. It's the cool girls club. Like, that's what book of the month is, and that's why it sucks ass, because it's like, those aren't even the best reads. Like,
what's crazy is when you actually go through with what is genuinely on your list. So like in February, like I went through and I said, okay, I have a list of books I want to read. And I went through and looked at like what they have. I ended up skipping February because I was like, every book on here is trying so hard to change my life and like be this book that basically makes me have this breakthrough. Like I use.
You mean you don't want self-help fiction?
Exactly. Like I want to escape my real world. Like I don't want to think about the pandemic during the day. Like I don't want to sit down and read a book about a girl with mental health problems because I have enough to fucking deal with. It's like those books are like, this girl had someone get shot in her family and everybody died and this person had a drug overdose. And it's like, okay, this is so emotionally heavy. Like I like fiction and I like romance and I like fantasy because it allows me to just peace out. Like it's like disassociating, but it's fine. Like,
right.
We just need to know what we're getting into.
Yeah,
is what it is.
Yeah,
I just don't want to sit down and
like
read a book about someone who's having an absolutely obliterated hard time when I'm having a hard time. And it's like, I like to read about people who are doing well because it's like, oh my God, someone is doing well in this world that's just completely fucked up and overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think that's what made Court of Silver Flames so different.
Yeah, 1000%.
That's a drink for
nice
you, Mary.
A woman. It was so nice to see a woman, and like I will praise Throne of Glass because like I know I texted Kelsey like 2 weeks ago. I was like, it's so nice to see a woman doing well and like kicking butt because she just wants to.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it was like, it's so welcoming to see a woman like doing well and kicking butt, and it's not because she has some trauma that she's like trying to resolve. She just wants to kick ass.
Yeah.
True.
Although Aylin does have trauma.
She does. She has a lot of trauma, but she forgets it because she disassociates from all of it.
It's interesting too to me sometimes that there's this like in between, right, between romantic fiction and the next category we're going to talk about, which is romance/new adult, where it's like fantasy plus like a romantic plot line, right? So I'm thinking of books like The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is a lesbian fantasy, like a high fantasy lesbian
which completely
romance.
took over book talk too.
Right. But it's not really as much romance as it is fantasy. It's fantasy plus lesbian romance, which is awesome. So can we really put it in the romance category? Probably not. It probably deserves its whole own like podcast episode or series. Crossland, PJ. But that being said, then we
you
get
don't
into
want our
something
perspective.
like,
Let's be honest.
No, I do want your perspective. I think it'd be interesting. Something like romance / new adult. Which, Mary, what is romance / new adult fiction?
It's a great question. I feel like romance and new adult is when there's just enough spice that it doesn't quite fit into young adult anymore. And usually the characters are from like 18 to like late 20s. But they still kind of have these like new budding relationships and are still kind of going through these like entering the world, coming of age moments, but with spice, I think.
Right. Yeah. I think it's these characters who, I think Kelsey said it earlier, as adults, right? We want to read books about people who are living the lives that we live. And
Right.
that includes reading books that have a realistic description of sex.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening to the first half of the show. The second half should be in your feed, so make sure to check that out to hear the explosive conclusion.